escape. My mind is full and I can't go to the factory. They've changed the timetable to add some new girls, and so I'm not on the schedule. But my parents don't know this.
When you come into the Digunta and you reach MED school, you can just make a right at the end of the lane, and my house is just past the well and just before the pink church.
My work is about talking to people and trying to understand their experience. I'm not able to do my work and go someplace and just shut myself in a studio. My process is listening. When I put my voice in the head of a viewer, it is really just to get them in touch with their own voice. It allows you, the viewer, to interpret what we're in front of.
Happy Independence Day, it says on the wall nearby. I imagine a day when I will be independent, at least free from my parents, although not too free, because they're not well.
One of the ways I've been working for several years now is creating these walking tours that are made up of fictional narratives that are about the place. They're meant to be experienced directly in the place that the stories are written for. So when I started working with the girls at Jagruti, which is an NGO based in Bangalore, rather than to say, okay, you guys can feed me source information and I will create a narrative from that. Instead, I'll give you my process and help you kind of work through how you would do this. So, working with the girls at Jagruti, they really authored the story. They chose the places. I kind of brought them through the way that I typically think about characters and instead facilitated their being able to write it.
My mother-in-law is very demanding. I'm trying to learn to do things in exactly her way, so she does not get so angry with me. And when we first met, she had kindly said that I was pretty and a fine wife for Ganesh. And for the first weeks, I seemed to do okay with pleasing her. Now she calls me a waste of life.
When I took them to Lalbagh for the first time, that was enough to jog them into a kind of organic development of a character of their own. We were sitting on a bench just taking a little break, and we started to talk about like what kind of person would come to this park, and they started to describe this young woman and why she would come. And eventually a few minutes into this conversation I said, okay, well, what would her name be? And that's where we came up with Padma. And from there she just kind of seemed to take on a life of her own.
They're going to imagine, right?
Mm-hmm. Every story has this challenge. So I want to help us understand if we have any changes to the structure, because the story can change, but after today, the structure can't change. So can you tell me what's changing about Padma before we find our roots at Lalbagh?
ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಅವಳು.
Okay. So yesterday they were talking that all these things has happened in her life. Now her sister will say, after seeing you going through all these things, even I don't want to get married.
Right.
So that's what the sister says.
But I don't think she should suffer. And usually I don't say what I think about Padma, right? I just ask you what you think. But I don't think that she should stay in a situation that she suffers just so she can say she made it work, right?
ಅಂದರೆ ಗಂಡನ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಕಷ್ಟ ಆಯ್ತಲ್ಲ, ಸೊ
ಬೇರೆಯವ್ರು ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಡ್ದಂಗೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ನಾನು ತುಂಬ ಕಲ್ತಂಗೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನುವಾಗ ಅವಳೇ ಓನಾಗಿ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾಳೆ.
she'll go to the job and she'll keep working, and there she'll meet somebody, and that person will tell her, since you know embroidery and tailoring and everything, why don't you start something on your own?
Okay.
So she'll work for some time and then she'll think about starting a new like class where she can teach others also.
When I'm doing my projects, I kind of move between talking with people and walking the space, right? And understanding where can I situate the narrative, because it's a choreographed experience. We only have 8 minutes to tell the story. We've only got 4 minutes between the rose garden and when she gets to the tree with the monkeys. We've got to be succinct. We've got to look at what's really here. So we spend a lot of time walking in the physical place and seeing what's really possible to do there. And those constraints actually create a lot of interesting dynamics that I couldn't anticipate. I only know after the stories are written kind of the themes that will emerge.
The time of terror is neither short nor long, really. It is more like frozen, stopped entirely. The last year of my life happened all in the same moment. Getting married, moving to my husband's home, getting to know my in-laws, feeling first welcomed and then finally under siege. Time started again when my parents agreed that I could come back home. But this kind of time is like a rusty car. It starts and then it stalls.
For us, Kianga's project is very socially relevant because it has gone into different sectors of not only of the city but also different cultural and social areas. So it becomes a very complex kind of a project where it's just not individual artists. It's a group of musicians, a group of young girls, it's Kianga, it's a whole team that has worked in many different multidimensional ways to put this whole narrative together. The first agenda was that I introduced Kianga to Jagruti. And all of you know that Jagruti is a kind of a shelter for displaced young women who are currently being self-employed and being self-reliant. So for Kianga to meet them and understand their context and lives was a trigger to locate and create Padma. So Padma was any one of these girls.
But even they have their own distinct style.
And there was another layer of musicians who started creating music to complement the narrative.
And so the more that we can explain what we have in mind for Padma, the more they can think about what should it feel like, the music, and what should it sound like. And they have to start to imagine as well, what kind of tone will Padma need? Is it a slow song or a fast song or a happy song or a sad song? So we have to tell them so they can think about it.
I had this experience to make a music soundtrack for movies. It's like a movie, as you know, it's like one longer story that you have to make a music for. But this time we have one longer story that I have to do only one part of it, and in other parts the different musicians come and then translate on their own languages, and it's very interesting to see what will happen.
This time in the garden is a treasure to me. My schedule is flexible now that I have my own embroidery business. The idea of a glass house is curious to me. Even though I know nobody lives there, it seems impossible to think that one could live in a house of glass. I imagine that one day, the footsteps of all the people in Bangalore and the rattle of all the auto rickshaws will make it crack in 1,000 places all of a sudden, like an earthquake.
We were really looking for a way to share the process with the larger community. And so we presented 3 community workshops. The first was at Vimochana, which is a women's advocacy organization. The second was at Shanti Road. And the third was at Alternative Law Forum. And they really challenged the girls to think beyond the kinds of resolutions that they'd seen, to kind of chart their own path, to rethink the horizons of what would be possible for them. And the girls really took that to heart. But when they first started telling the story, the girls felt really clearly, that there were no other options. Her only choices were to stay in that marriage or to essentially acknowledge that her life was over.
From there, the girls got inspired to change their stories to make Padma very strong and self-reliant. This was another trajectory that added a crucial element of social justice to the young women who, for the first time, have moved out of their sheltered existence into a space that provides social justice.
And even though I'm certain of my choice to divorce, I still cannot imagine any man besides Ganesh. I believed 100% in him forever. I still think he was a nice man, and that my choice was not so crazy. And that if he would have been willing to leave his parents' home, a marriage still might have worked. But for him that was impossible. For me, as you no doubt have concluded in this story, it was impossible for me to stay.
I think the tension between the individual and tradition and culture is something that is reflected in young people kind of constantly. The question of finding an individual voice and path and moving Indian culture to a new place. I heard almost every young person that I worked with negotiating that at some level. And so, it's something small, but to have a conversation with them about what those choices are and to do that through the vehicle of a fictional character. The fact that Padma gets to contemplate that she has a choice, that she almost chooses to suspend a certain kind of decision, right? Not for or against marriage, not for or against family. That is the place where their story really starts to be of the moment and a reflection on our contemporary reality, where the reality projects into the future with not just uncertainty, but with options, right? That the girls are really kind of staking a claim. And I think what we were able to really attend to with the story of Padma was really an open-ended exploration of possibility. What can a young woman do now